Ladies and gentlemen, the topic for today's debate is that President Obama deserves to be re-elected. We as the Affirmative believe that President Obama does indeed deserve to be elected for a second term of office. I'll be speaking about America at the time of Obama's initial election and what he has managed to achieve throughout this time. Our second speaker will expand further on the necessity of Obama's re-election so that his plans, most of which are long-term, may come to fruition. She will also speak of his current election promises and the way in which Barack Obama is a unifying force within American society. Before I begin, I think it is necessary to give a brief overview of the context of this debate. It is not possible or practical to discuss Barack Obama's bid for a second term without first considering that this is an election which is essentially a race between two candidates who have a real chance of winning, Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Thus, in assessing how much Obama deserves to be re-elected, the context of the election must be taken into consideration. The alternative is Mitt Romney. Therefore, it follows that if Barack Obama is a better candidate than Mitt Romney, then he deserves to be re-elected because he is the candidate who is best suited for the presidential role. The second context that must be considered is the state of America when Obama inherited the presidency. When Obama came into his role, the country and the Western world was already in the grips of a recession that was being likened to the Great Depression of the 1930s. America was heavily involved into expensive, deadly and unpopular wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The terrorist threat was still at large, and the health system in America meant that there were many going without treatment because they could not afford health insurance. This is the state of affairs that the Bush administration left Obama with. Now, we're not trying to play the blame game here. What is relevant is the adversity that Obama faced from his very first day in the role, and he has performed admirably in responding to these crises. Without a doubt, the most significant problem that the US has faced in Obama's term and still faces today is the economy. Obama implemented schemes that lifted the economy and stimulated employment. His key policy implementation was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of February 2009, and there is voluminous evidence that this has provided a real stimulus that averted a second depression and ended a brutal recession. America's top economic forecasters, including the Congressional Budget Office and JP Morgan Chase, agree that it increased GDP by at least 2 percentage points and saved 2.5 million people from losing their jobs. For 29 months now, there has been continual job creation. Obama managed to make an extraordinarily painful time less painful. A comparison can be made between Obama and a certain Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt came into the presidency at the nadir of the Great Depression of the 1930s, and through his New Deal economic scheme managed to resurrect a failing economy. With the benefit of hindsight, we can see that Roosevelt averted what would have been an even worse economic disaster than that was already happening, and in doing so created a legacy of infrastructure that lives on today. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act is Obama's New Deal. Obama needs to be given a second term, just as Roosevelt was, for the true effects of his economic stimulus to be recognised. The worst part of the recession was seen within the first few months of Obama's term. His timely stimulus has helped to begin the slow process of rebuilding the economy back to its primacy. Obama cannot be punished for being president at the time of the financial crisis. He must be judged and rewarded for his efforts and achievements during this time. Barack Obama is a man with a vision for the future of America. Upon his election, the withdrawal from the Iraq War was one of Obama's first priorities. He repaired diplomatic ties that had worn thin during Bush's administration by displaying a political and diplomatic finesse that hadn't been seen for about 8 years. He was also integral to the death of Osama bin Laden and is committed to the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, which will be completed by the end of 2014. Obama displays empathy and foresight, which makes him the ideal candidate at the next election. He deserves another term in office so he can see his vision through. Another example of his long-term vision is his health reforms, which have an immense benefits for the American community. The Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act of 2010 is a phased introduction over 4 years of a comprehensive system of mandated health insurance. It eliminates some of the worst practices of health insurance companies and makes health insurance more accessible by offering subsidies for those worse off. And consider that this was all achieved during a congressional gridlock. The obstructionist Republican Tea Party in the last 20 months have blocked over 60 bills. Some of these blocked bills would have put over 2 million citizens to work. Ladies and gentlemen, presidents do not have magic wands, and it is a testament to Obama's political and diplomatic skills and his drive to do good for the people of America that he is still able to get so many bills to pass through. Mitt Romney does not have these political and diplomatic skills, and we won't see him producing a magic wand anytime soon. It is thus clear that Barack Obama deserves to be re-elected for a second term. His achievements are substantial, and what the American society needs in these tumultuous times are his experience and his envisioned drive to do good for the community. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to propose.
Obama does not deserve to be re-elected because he has failed as a Liberal leader. The Affirmative have tried to say that that Obama deserves to be re-elected because he has done all this amazing reform for America, and that he doesn't deserve to be punished for the context in which he was elected, such as the economy. However, they are forgetting the fact that he has failed the average America who voted him in. Most of the average American's wealth is invested in the real estate sector, yet he went to save the banking institutions and the top 1% of American earners, just absolutely ignoring the average American middle classer. And he could have done more for them, and we see this because the middle class is fast disappearing, pushing people to the extremes so that they are losing their jobs. That he's also, the Affirmative has also said that he has succeeded in lots of election promises, yet we fail to see this. One of the main things he got elected on was to change the system of Washington, yet he's done nothing no serious attempts to change the system. The Affirmative also said that Obama has implemented this fantastic healthcare reform, yet this is so many Liberal voters say that this is a terrible policy because it does not go far enough and it does not help the average American. And finally, they tried to say that Obama deserves to be re-elected because Mitt Romney is a worse candidate. However, they are ignoring the true issue. This debate is not about whether or not Republicans deserve to be re-elected, but if Obama does, based on his track record. Obama was voted in by Americans in the hope that after 8 consecutive years with Bush, America could be led by a brilliant progressive president. His autobiography was entitled The Audacity of Hope, but his actions have been fearful and hopeless. He promised a plethora of fantastic liberal policies, yet as this team will argue, he has failed miserably in delivery, and thus he is a disappointment to Americans who voted in a Liberal Democratic candidate. I will be talking about the failure of his policies, such as healthcare and being a leader of African Americans, while Rebecca, our second speaker, will outline how he has failed in terms of the economy and foreign policy. The best way to judge whether or not a sitting president deserves to be re-elected is to not look at his future election promises, but to examine his historical record. If a president has failed in the first term of his presidency, which Obama very much has, what evidence is there that he will improve? During Obama's campaign trail, he said that if we do not fundamentally change the way Washington works, then the problems we've been talking about for the last generations will be the same ones that haunt us for generations to come. We are nearing the end of his term, yet there have been no serious attempts at challenging this system that he said was so wrought with failure. Obama also promised to shut down Guantanamo Bay by 2009. However, it is still open today, and in June this year, it received an additional $40 million to upgrade its satellite communication system. Obama has received mountains of criticism in response to his Affordable Healthcare Act, better known as Obamacare, from both sides of politics. What should have been an excellent piece of social reform and helped literally millions of Americans is a complete failure. It fails to be for the majority of Americans, making it unpopular and low quality, reinforcing the current private healthcare system that is inequitable, inefficient, and costs Americans their lives. Although America is perceived as an extremely capitalistic society, they are not historically opposed to social programs. When Medicare was introduced in early 1965, it had 62% of support, and by the end of the year, 82% in Harris polls. However, in March 2010, the New York Times CBS poll found that 32% of Americans were in support of in support of Obamacare, and in May this year, it was still at 34%. It's not just conservatives who believe that Obamacare is farcical. In this poll, a fifth of those opposed were liberals who said it did not go far enough. Instead of this reform making Obama a liberal hero, remembered for generations, the Affordable Healthcare Act just highlights Obama's inadequacies, and thus he does not deserve to be re-elected. Finally, in 2008, 96% of all African American voters voted for Obama. In 2008, Obama promised so much to liberals and Afro-Americans, yet his policies, healthcare, Guantanamo Bay, the political system, have been failures or non-existent, and that is why he does not deserve to be re-elected.
There's a few issues that have come up in today's debate so far that I feel need to be addressed right now. Okay, so the Affirmative team here have given us a few arguments. They basically said that Obama has failed as a liberal leader, not as a leader in general, but as a liberal leader. And we'd like to point out that we actually think that Obama is the epitome of a liberal leader. They've said that he's created this sort of plutonic state in America through his tax cuts, only to the top and only functioning for those institutions. But we'd like to point out that actually in 2009, what Obama did was make tax cuts to the middle class, so that's the average American. And one of the things that Obama stands for, and one of the platforms of his Liberal Party, is to function for and protect the rights of the middle class. They've also said today that Mitt Romney is not a part of this debate. But we'd like to say that as this is a binary two-party election, his merit is relative to his political context. We can't just look at Obama as a figurehead, and we can't just look at him separate to his political context. It's a binary election, and you need to consider both in order to determine his merit. So we have to look at this realistically. And then thirdly, today they've been talking about all of his failed policies. So essentially they've developed this idea that he's broken promises. He's broken all these promises about what he said he was going to do, but these policies that he said he was going to enforce have actually turned into failure, so he hasn't actually fulfilled the promises. We'd like to point out that according to PolitiFact, 500 campaign promises, out of these, he actually kept 173. He compromised 52 according, again, to his political context. He broke 63. And so he broke 63 out of 500 promises. And we think, given the economic situation, 63 out of 5 promises is more of a compromise and had to be done in order to adjust to his political situation. And so then again, they've attacked Obamacare. They basically said that it's bad and it doesn't work. And we'd like to say that Obamacare, for starters, is constitutional. And it means that there is no more freeloading of American people. It means that the Congressional Budget Office estimates that in 2011, Obamacare will actually reduce to a federal deficit by $210 billion. $210 billion, ladies and gentlemen, over the next decade. So saving about $1 trillion over the second decade. And we'd like to argue that one cannot expect a $210 billion reduction in a 2-year term, and that's why Obama needs to be re-elected, because his plans go over the long term, and these kind of benefits will only come in the long term, so he needs to be re-elected. They've also said that he's made a mess of foreign policy, but they didn't really elaborate on this, so we'd like to challenge them as to what exactly about foreign policy is a mess, and we believe that actually Obama has restored some of the glory of American foreign policy that was one of the worst in the world prior to his election. And so today I'm going to be talking about how Obama's policies are actually designed, as I said earlier, to work in the long term and provide for the long term. And this is what makes him a responsible leader, because he actually considers his social context. So if we look at his tax reform, we can see that not only has he managed to stabilise the US economy in the midst of a recession, he will now, if re-elected, move from this stabilisation process into this advancement process. And it's fantasy, we think, of the negative, to have expected him to do both, or just the latter, just the advancement, in the first term of his office, considering the situation that he came into at the cusp of his election. So in terms of foreign policy, which is a key issue in today's debate, Obama has announced that he is, for example, we can look at the Israeli-Palestine conflict. So Obama has announced that he is supporting a two-state policy for the Israeli conflict. This has been something that has been backed by the government for years, but has never actually been acted on, but Obama was the first president to acknowledge the policy and actually commit to this kind of policy. So these are the kind of real differences that Obama is making. And were he not to have his second term in office, he wouldn't be able to fulfill these promises. And that's where broken promises come in. They come in from this gridlock. Secondly, we have the war in Afghanistan. Obama is going to withdraw troops from Afghanistan in or by 2014. So again, this is a long-term plan. 2014, it's not something that can be done overnight. It's something that will encourage peaceful resolutions and the protection of his people. But because it is such a drastic move and such a revolutionary act, it's something that has to take a longer course of time. And so he does need his second term of office, as all great presidents have been given. He needs a longer term to be able to first stabilise and then advance. So my next point is of unification and how Obama has actually, in a very liberal sense, this is why we think that, unlike the negative team has put forward to you today, we think that Obama is actually one of the most liberal leaders America has faced. So my next point is how he unifies America. Instead of what he does is unify the political minorities of America, and this is something that hasn't been done before, as they've been previously not invited to this Tea Party.
Okay, so today the affirmative team have told us that Obama deserves to be re-elected because he is the better candidate in a two-party election. But the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of deserve is to have done something considered especially worthy of, or heroic. So it's not exactly relevant to the topic. The topic is not that Obama is the better candidate in this election, but that Obama deserves to be re-elected. And so the only way to argue that President Obama deserves to be re-elected is to assess what he has delivered during his first term and to look at the promises he made and managed to keep, not any future plans and policies during his current campaign, but the concrete evidence of real serious actions and policies. So the opposition also talked about the gridlock and how with the situation that Obama was in, he managed to approve a lot of policies and make quite a lot of significant changes. However, it has been said that by many people that he didn't push for or show the same passions that he had shown in his campaign. So, for example, the healthcare reform, it took a long time, a lot longer than it should have, because he pretty much downplayed the importance of the whole scheme. Yes. Okay, so in a time of lousy economy and high unemployment, Obama's failure to avert the debt ceiling crisis and effectively manage the economy conveys his inadequacy to perform as president. Has the banking system returned to lending? Has the American economy been returned to health? Has the problem of too big to fail banks been resolved? Has the problem of non-transparency been resolved? Ladies and gentlemen, the answer to all these questions is no. Income inequality in the US is currently at a level higher than it has ever been. You'd even have to go back to before the Great Depression. According to statistics, the top 1% of Ghanaians acquires 20% of the national income, and in some years this figure has even reached 23%. The top 1/10 of 1% has 40% of all the wealth in the US. The number of middle-class jobs is diminishing, and their wages decreased. For example, auto workers have seen their wages cut down to half, and in some cases even a further 2/3. The number of people within the working class has decreased as the poor economy and high unemployment rates has pushed families to the extreme. The average American had lost most of their wealth in housing, and as housing prices plummeted, many lost a lot of what they had. Now, you could blame all of this on a recession, which made the situation a lot worse. But if instead of addressing the stock market, as the government actively did, with policies only trying to recover the stock market and not the housing market, it is clear that Obama ignored the very people who make up his base, middle-class voters. Columbia University's economic professor and 2001 Nobel Prize laureate for economics, Joseph Stiglitz, was an informal advisor to some of Obama's economic team, and he describes Obama as "don't rock the boat conservative." Obama's $825 billion promise to keep unemployment rates below 6% has also failed. Since the passing of this stimulus, the nation has seen 1.1 million job losses, and its longest streak of unemployment levels above 8% since the Great Depression. He also pledged to cut the deficit in half by the end of his first term in office. However, it still remains at more than double the amount he promised. His spending has mortgaged the nation's future, and by the time of the election, he will have added almost $6 billion of new debt. Under Obama's watch, America lost its AAA credit rating for the first time since 1917, and Obama's failure to actively address these key issues he promised to fix for the American people proves his disappointment as president. Foreign policy is another area where Barack Obama has failed to fulfill promises he made during his campaign. Obama's biggest failures on this topic have been his own ideas, not the problems he inherited, such as the wars in Al-Qaeda, but his problems such as the global nuclear arms control, an initiative which won him the Nobel Peace Prize before he even acted upon it. However, the results of the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty to date have made little progress and are hardly price-worthy. In fact, the treaty has only affected the US arsenal and must have a lot more further reductions to have any purpose. Obama's elaborate summits to control nuclear weapons are also ineffective, as the most dangerous proliferation threats emanate from North Korea and Iran, and these countries don't attend summits or sign international treaties. Furthermore, after fighting a de facto war, which Obama didn't consult the Congress about in the Middle East is in shambles, the Arab Spring being nothing more than a replacement of tyrants who were friendly to US tyrants who are not. And Obama's popularity today in Egypt is lower than it was in his first address in Cairo. And as the negative team, we are proud to oppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we are faced with an opposition team who are fully prepared to terminate a president which has succeeded in the most difficult of circumstances. Now today in my speech I'll answer three main questions. Firstly, is Obama at his core a progressive leader? Secondly, how have his policies affected the economy? And thirdly, how has he affected foreign policy? Then I'll look at some of the small issues which we've seen rise over the course of today's debate. So we come to this first main issue of whether or not Obama is actually a progressive liberal leader. We saw a lot at first of the negative team coming up here and saying that he's really abandoned his election promises and he's really failed in being the leader which he should be. We have a few answers to that. Firstly, Obama actually has an incredible record in terms of his promises. He's kept over 100 of his promises. We heard that at second. Secondly, even if Obama had not implemented such a large amount of his promises, we don't think that that justifies opposing his re-election. The volatile political climate Obama voyaged into made implementing and thus sustaining election promises really, really hard. And that's not an excuse, that's a reality. Firstly, we had the congressional gridlock, and then we had the abundance of problems which Obama inherited from the Bush administration. We don't think that something as basic as having like a checklist to tick off all your election promises determines whether you are or whether you are not a good or a bad leader. Good leaders don't follow procedure. They adapt to the situation they find themselves entrenched with, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what President Obama did. If Obama had ignored the political atmosphere and the immediate problems he encountered, which subsequently ignited the need to restructure and in some cases actually construct whole new policies, then it would have been like eating off a dirty plate. He had primary responsibility to clean the slate so that then he could build his new policies. We think that what Obama did was exemplify the idea of a progressive leader, because what he did is he saw that there were hurdles in front of him and he worked to jump over them. And it doesn't matter about time, because what matters is that you do things in a productive and efficient way, not that you rush over and leave holes and leave gaps. What Obama did was he acted in a professional and responsible way. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what a progressive leader is. They also said under this idea of progress that he failed his home ground looking at African Americans. Now, we believe that this is fundamentally incorrect, because not only has Obama actually had legal reforms in terms of closing the gap, we've also seen him in terms of inspiring young black people and also people of minority groups. We also looked at this idea of Obamacare. Obama had to shape and mould policy to get through congressional gridlock. It seems that the negative team today think that they can just have a magic wand and fix everything. We think that it is always better to compromise for some change than give up and achieve none at all. So we come to this second issue of whether or not Obama has ruined the economy. Now, we heard the word ruined from the negative team, and we think that that's fundamentally incorrect because of what it does is it infers that Obama, through some immediate fault of his own, caused the downfall of America's economy. That's a notion which is fundamentally incorrect. According to the Wall Street Journal, 60% of voters agree that Obama inherited detrimental economic conditions. So what does this mean? It means that firstly, Obama had no control over the negative progression of the economy and that therefore it is inherently unfair to blame him for that. Secondly, we believe that Obama, in response to the financial state of the US, actually acted in a way which was so responsible that it justified his re-election. We heard the negative come up here and say a lot about how Obama didn't do enough about the housing, about the real estate sort of like industry in America. However, narrow it, guys. It's like, okay, he didn't put a whole lot of money straight into the housing sector. What he did do was do tax cuts, which made it easier for people to buy houses and thus produced growth. Like, just because it's not really simple doesn't mean it didn't happen. Thirdly, even if one disagrees with the usefulness or effectiveness of Obama's reforms, we believe that the sheer immediacy and strength of his reaction proves that he is a capable and dedicated leader. So we come to this last fundamental question of whether foreign policy is a mess. We didn't hear that many examples coming over here from the negative team, but we think that Obama, if anything, has improved the foreign policy mess, which was created and deserted by the Bush administration. They said it wasn't Bush's fault, it was. He left Obama with 2 wars and a really bad international image. What Obama did was take a softer stance and work towards building international links based more significantly around equity than disparity, around friendship than fear. We think that that was really important. We heard one example about global nuclear arms and how Obama hasn't worked hard enough. Obama has been working with the Russians, he's been negotiating. The fact that he's been sensitive and slow is a tactical move because it's a really volatile situation, like it's nuclear arms. He's not going to go in there and be like, do whatever we want. That's not realistic. The negative team has also raised this idea of how it's not Romney versus Obama. We think that the word deserved is relative to the situation, and in the context, like deciding merit is based upon choosing between 2 different candidates. It's a 2-party system. It's between Romney and it's between Obama. However, even if that wasn't the case, we believe that we proved at first and second that there was enough evidence of Obama's track record that he would do a good job. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very, very proud to propose.
We as the negative emphasize that a man is as good as his failures. Obama was elected as an unexperienced candidate, and ultimately this reflected his inability to fulfill his main goals and his main promises to the people of the US. The fact is that yes, he has passed policies such as health reform and he has made effective economic successes, but he hasn't fulfilled his goals as a leader, and so therefore, why should he deserve to be re-elected as a US president? So I'm going to deal with the 5 main issues of this debate in relation to what presidents have to deal with in the US. So the first is healthcare. Obama's healthcare plan will cost north of $2 trillion in the first 10 years, as opposed to the less than $1 trillion figure that was trumpeted when Obamacare was finally passed. Now, this colossal figure will lead to huge doctor shortages, exploding healthcare costs, companies dropping insurance, death panels, and much longer waits to see a doctor, as well as a dramatic deterioration in the quality of American medical care. And this increase will have to come from tax increases and tax benefit cuts. The worst part is that poll after poll after poll shows that 70% of Americans or more were already happy with their health coverage. And Obamacare remains to be unpopular and is viewed by more than half of the country as unconstitutional. What kind of president doesn't respond to the views and needs of their public? Why should Obama deserve to be re-elected if he obviously isn't responding to the views and voices of his people? Obama does not deserve to be re-elected as president, as he has failed as a leader to respond to the needs of his people and has subordinated the broadening economic and educational opportunities to the secondary issue of healthcare. The second issue I'll be talking about today is the economy. Now, the re-election of Obama has the potential to allow for the continuation of economic policies that could strongly affect the US economy in a negative manner. Obama's $825 billion stimulus failed to keep unemployment below 8% as promised. Since President Obama's stimulus passed, America has lost 1.1 million jobs. Obama predicted his investments in green energy would create 5 billion jobs, but Wall Street Journal reports that some $90 billion in government spending has delivered but very few jobs. Even if every part of Obama's deficit reduction proposal was enacted, the deficit at the end of his term would still be $1.33 billion, more than twice what he promised. Ultimately, the fact is that he is unable to actually accomplish his goals as a president, and this reflects his failure, and therefore he does not deserve to be re-elected. The third issue I'll be talking about is military. After a year of political costly pressure on Israel, Obama has been enormously unsuccessful in bringing about a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. He began with an optimistic bid for historic change, but failed as it was ultimately based on tactical misjudgment and a breakdown of friendship with Israel. So now the US has less capital to work with. They have damaged their reputation amongst Middle East veterans and gained absolutely no credibility with the Arab people of the Middle East, all because of Obama's issue and his policies. So where then does a president who promised a new approach to the old Middle East and ultimately failed begin if he wins a second term of president? The last issue I'll talk to you about today is about the black people. Obama, when elected, promised to deal with the concerns of his black people as a result of a popular black voter turnout in favor of himself. However, at the moment, he runs the risk of insulting his black constituency. The black socio-economic situation is in a dire state, with near Great Depression levels. Rationalizations we hear coming from Obama says that he has better issues to deal with, such as the economy. But black businesses in America are not flourishing under Obama's beneficial programs. If anything, race relations in the country have appeared to have gotten worse. Blacks still have a 14.1% unemployment rate. The first black president seems like a hollow prize in the view of his failures. It is thereby obvious that by being unable to fulfill his goals regarding the majority of his supporters, the black people, Obama does not deserve to be re-elected as president. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to say I think it was great to see these two schools back this year, and definitely got a bit of a sense of unfinished business. A real rivalry in the making, although I think to spread the love around next year, if you both get to the semi-finals, we'll make you debate each other then. But, I mean, both schools so excellent all the way through the tournament, and both of them had to overcome some very, very tough competition to get to this point, and I'm actually very glad to see the second speaker from Hornsby Girls High in the audience, who almost knocked Penrith out in the last round and who was one of the outstanding speakers of the tournament. And I mean, I think all of the schools in this tournament really exemplified the fact that schools are not just there to get the highest possible HSC marks for students, but actually to train future leaders. And I think that we've got some fantastic examples of that here. In terms of how the debate itself went on this very vexatious but I find quite entertaining issue, the first thing I would like to say is this dispute over what the word deserve means actually in the end wasn't really relevant to the outcome of the debate. For the record, I think it is actually the Affirmative's right to set the terms of the debate in those terms, but it didn't really matter in the end, because I think that actually what both sides were talking about was the same thing, which was fundamentally, has he done a good job or not? Now, you may be aware that in normal school debating at this age level, speeches are about 6 to 8 minutes, and here we were forcing them to sit down after 5. And I thought, given that these were actually 6 very, very well constructed speeches, and I thought that the first Affirmative was an excellent example of actually just how to build a really solid case starting at first, and it was very clear what the Affirmative were getting at, and they telegraphed right from the beginning what they were going to be doing. The negative, I thought, actually had a very clever kind of approach to this debate in terms of saying, look at, has he actually succeeded on his own terms? Has Obama done what he set out to do? So the way that both of these were set up, it was set up for a real struggle, and both sides had a lot of very strong material. We did feel as adjudicators actually both sides missed certain opportunities and missed certain material that they could have picked up on. I mean, a lot of discussion about minorities, for example, and who is Obama's constituency just seemed to come back to this fact of African Americans, where there was really a lot more to talk about there on both sides. But we did feel that, clearly reflecting a lot of good preparation in this debate, that both sides had very strong cases. We would probably say in both cases a bit too much of that material was coming out at third, but that is sometimes how it goes down. So probably then what this debate really came down to was who did a better job of knocking the other side down here. And I think that this is where the debate was really won today. I thought one side clearly did a much better job of rebuttal all the way through the debate today, and that side, also featuring one of the outstanding speakers of the tournament at third, was Penrith Selective High today.